Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're joining from. Welcome to this edition of our webinar from NimbleWork. The topic today is continuous learning and improvement, guiding your team on an experience and not a journey. This is brought to you by Nimble, and our motto and vision is to humanize work, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So let's get started. I'm seeing people joining in. We will get started with some housekeeping and then continue with the main session. So the agenda for the day, we'll just start with some introductions. I'll quickly introduce NimbleWork slash Digite. That's used to be our earlier name, for those of you who may not know a lot about us. And then we'll go on to the main session, continuous learning and improvement. And then at the end, we will have a Q&A session. Hopefully, you will get enough to take from the session that you would have some questions at the end of the session, and we can make it a very interactive session. Just some housekeeping. So the session is being recorded. So you will all get a link to the recording after the webinar. For the questions, there is a Q&A section on the Zoom panel. You can use that to ask questions anytime. And we will take the questions in the order they come at the end of the webinar. All right. So with that, introductions, Christina Sukram is our main speaker today. She's a project leader and educator. She has a company, CNS Consulting. My name is Mahesh Singh. I'm co-founder and I handle marketing at NimbleWork. And before so let me first talk a little bit about Christina. So Christina, with more than 15 years of corporate experience as a project manager. She's an experienced project leader and educator. The way we met was that Christina's name appeared as one of the top 250 project management influencers in the world. So she carries a lot of weight. She has a ton of experience in project management. And of course, she's here to share some of that experience with us today. She's provided leadership experience at some of Canada's largest technology companies. She's also an entrepreneur, like I was just mentioning. She's founded CNS Project Consulting and helps clients in IT, education, and web industries. She's also an instructor. She's a teacher and instructor at the Wilfrid Laurier University and OCAD University in the Toronto area, and she regularly teaches there as well as shares a love about project management with her students. Before I hand over the session to her, a quick introduction to NimbleWork. So we have been a pioneer in web-based work management / project management solutions. It's called Adaptive Project Management by Gartner these days. We are headquartered in Cupertino, California. We have more than 1 million users around the world of our various products. One of the key things that we do really is to help you in a very collaborative, very nimble way, as we like to call it, manage your teams, manage your work, and manage your projects, enabled by AI, so that you can truly benefit from all the technology capabilities that we provide. Our various products are available under the Nimble brand, but there are different types of products that you can use. And one of them that perhaps Christina will talk a little bit about in the context of continuous improvement is the Nimble Retro, which is a retrospective product for agile teams that might be doing retrospective meetings. But besides that, as you can see here, we have Nimble Agile, work management, OKRs, hybrid for teams that are doing both traditional and agile methodologies. There is the hybrid approach. And then, of course, the enterprise combines all of these capabilities onto a single platform in case you're looking for something as a uniform sort of product to manage all of your work, which is really overall our enabler. The Nimble Retro is a very interesting product, and it's very simple to use. Teams can download and use it on their own, and very, very critical, of course. Retrospective as a ceremony is very critical for continuous improvement exercises, and our tool truly enables you to run it effectively, especially when you have distributed teams, isolated team members. You can easily use Retro to manage all of your retrospectives. I'll definitely encourage you to look at it if you're on the lookout for retrospective tools. I will skip past some of these product slides. As I said earlier, we have a motto: why be agile when you can be nimble? And the fact is that agile methodologies have been around for a long time. And there is a lot of movement or a lot of momentum to sort of move forward with the next stage of how you manage your business as an agile organization. And we believe that we truly enable you to do that. Just a quick look at some of our customers, and you might recognize some known brands. We have a lot of very large customers and also some very small customers. So irrespective of the size of the team, our products can really be useful to you. So with that, let's begin. Christina, a very warm welcome to you. And let me stop sharing so that you can bring up your presentation.
Okay. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so thank you. Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. So today, I'm going to be spending some time talking a little bit about continuous improvement and learning and why we should be considering it as an experience and not necessarily a journey. To begin, in today's sessions, we're going to be talking about some of the concepts behind continuous improvement and learning and how it can be framed as a transformational experience rather than a journey. So in today's session, I'm going to be asking you to try and be a little bit open-minded to shift your perspective a little bit from traditionally what you may be more accustomed to thinking about learning and about continuous improvement. So for today's session, regardless of if your team is currently using an agile, waterfall, or hybrid project delivery methodology, or how your team is operating, I'd like you to have to be open-minded in considering that all teams have the ability to learn and improve. So if your team is currently in a waterfall project setup and delivery, some of the concepts that we talk about today, you may think that they're more applicable to agile project delivery, but really when we talk about learning and improvement, it is applicable to all teams and all project kind of delivery frameworks and setups. And finally, in today's session, I'd also like you to be a little bit open-minded and to consider yourself to be in the role of a leader within your organization. So even if you don't have an official title as a leader, or if you're not in an official capacity as in a leadership role, we all have the abilities in our respective roles to be able to influence and to affect change for others. So regardless of what your actual official job title is, I'd like you to please take today's content and please try, and if you'd like to integrate it into whatever role that you are in your organization, to try and build and create that culture of continuous improvement and learning. Okay, so to begin, we're going to take a look at how this culture can be an immersive and enriching experience under the framework of continuous improvement. So to begin, like any presentation, we have to set a framework and we need to set a foundation. So we're going to be talking about a couple of key definitions that we need to kind of understand in order for us to have a conversation about continuous improvement and continuous learning. So let's start with what is continuous improvement. So continuous improvement is the ongoing effort to enhance processes, systems, or outcomes. And we're going to be specifically looking at implementing changes incrementally or in smaller sections or chunks. Continuous improvement is also a mindset that encourages us to be proactive rather than reactive in our approach to problem solving. So it really does place an emphasis on the importance of learning from both of our successes and failures. And the key here is the learning that we can take from both successes and failures. So like any principle, there's always some guiding principles behind it. So some of you may be familiar with some of these principles behind continuous improvement if you've tried to implement continuous improvement within your current roles or current organizations. So you may be familiar with the plan, do, check, act cycle. So this is a continuous loop for planning, checking, studying, or acting, and it provides a very simple approach for problem solving and for managing changes. Some of you may also be familiar with Kaizen, or the Japanese philosophy of constant small improvements that you might be familiar with some of the agile frameworks. And also, for any of you who have are in organizations that may be applying some of the scaled, agile, or safe frameworks, you may be familiar with the concept of the growth mindset, which is taking a look at learning from our mistakes and improving. So regardless of what principles that you may be looking at or basing your continuous improvement efforts behind, all of these principles have in common that they look to have some type of systematic, data-driven framework that enables us to drive improvement and changes, and hopefully these changes will be sustainable. So some of the tools that you may be familiar with or may have used to help guide you on an effort of continuous improvement and learning includes things like root cause analysis or fishbone or Ishikawa diagrams that you may have looked at or tried to use to help you identify what may have been the problems or the causes if something on a project or program or initiative wasn't successful, to hopefully guide you and provide you with some data that will help then drive some actions for improvement. As a leader, we should always be questioning, why do we care about certain things? And then within this context, you may be asking yourself, well, why do I care about continuous improvement? Why, as a leader, should I devote precious time and resources from my organization into continuous improvement activities and trying to build a culture of continuous improvement? Well, there are a couple reasons, and the main one that I'd like to talk about today is, of course, that mistakes are often costly and failures are costly. So as much as we want to learn from our failures and use them as a learning tool, we do have to be realistic and practical in the fact that failures are costly. So we, of course, failures will happen, things will not work out, but we hope really not to be able to repeat those same mistakes over and over again. So getting into a continuous improvement culture and helping to build that culture can hopefully lead us to some improved efficiencies, productivity, and improved quality. Also, too, we're hoping that this culture will help us to create a culture where we engage with our employees and we improve on customer satisfaction. And regardless of what industry your organization is, what the shape or what the scope or what the size, all organizations should and need to stay agile and competitive in today's landscape. So as much as we think that our current processes or systems or tools that we have in place are great, there is always room to improve and always room to do better. And we should always have that in as part of our mindset and in the way that we operate. Okay. So now that we have a little bit of an understanding of what continuous improvement is and some of the principles behind continuous improvement and a little bit about some of the tools that we may have used in the past to help us guide us on our continuous improvement experience, I'm now going to spend some time talking about learning and how we learn and how do we create that culture then of a continuous learning environment. So traditionally, when we think back to when we were younger and we were children and we were in primary or elementary school, we might have learned in what we call a straight line or a very linear approach. So traditionally, we may look to have learned things in what we call a very linear approach, where we had identified or some kind of gap in our knowledge was identified. So this could be a gap in our knowledge, a skill, or a particular technique. We learned some type of new concept or we learned some type of new knowledge. We demonstrated some type of competence in that. So that often took place as some type of formal test or exam. I think many of us remember writing exams or quizzes or tests or certainly studying for them when we were students. And then once we demonstrated competence on it, we moved on to something else. So oftentimes, many of us, regardless of where we went to school, there was a set curriculum. We had a certain number of, of knowledge areas that we had to cover during a course or a semester. And once we had identified the learning gap, learned that concept, and then demonstrated competence, we moved on to something new. And oftentimes, that was it. So the bottom image here may represent what many of us kind of think of when we think of learning, that we think of it on a straight line kind of process. But in reality, based on our life experiences, either as professionals or in our personal lives, we may have come to the realization that really our learning experience is more like this image up here, where we may start at one point, but there may be many bends and turns and curves in the road to get us to the end of that knowledge that we want to acquire. So learning as we know it is not a straight journey. There's many ups and downs. It can be complicated and it can be messy. And this is especially true as adults, where learning is also largely based on our experiences. So we learn from both of our successes and our failures. So learning is not just a simple journey where necessarily we're going from point A to point B, and it's a very clean and precise journey where we have a very defined itinerary. We may take detours and stops and pauses along the way. So as adults, it's very important to recognize that our learning, it may not be such a straightforward journey as we traditionally think it may be, but it may be a little bit more complicated than that. And we are also basing it on our experience and how we interact with the knowledge that we're presented with. So as adults, we have this notion that we learn from our experiences. So learning from our experiences includes learning from our trials and errors and any experimentation we do. So this could be in our personal lives, in our professional lives, but this notion of learning as an experiences encompasses three things that I'd like us to think about today. So the first one is active engagement. So as adults, and the whole notion of learning and the experience is that we tend to be more actively involved. We're not just passive recipients of the knowledge. Oftentimes we're taking the knowledge and we're looking to apply it or do something with the knowledge. The second aspect of learning as an experience is that we're also including our personal reflection in this. So this is when we pause to think about what went right, what went wrong, or what we could have done differently, and how that shapes then how we learn. And then the third thing, and I've already touched on this, is as adults, we're able to apply the knowledge that we learn into real world contexts. So as children, we may not have had the life experiences or the knowledge to do this, or just the general experience to do this, but as adults, we're able to take the information that we learn and the experiences and apply it into our real world context. So one of the key things about experimental learning is that individuals actively participate in the process, and we take a little bit more time to reflect and make meaning of our experiences rather than some of the traditional ways that we may have learned information. So in agile teams even in waterfall teams, we find some of the similarities in this. Learning may often take place in a framework where we do some kind of innovation, or there's some kind of work, maybe it's a proof of concept or a discovery. We inspect the work that we do. So maybe this could be a demo, some type of demo to a customer, or we do some testing and we get some results, or we get some feedback. And then based on the results or the inspection or the feedback or the demo, we then make some incremental changes or tweaks to the work that we do. And we go in a circular kind of process. So a lot of organizations, whether it's waterfall in a traditional waterfall kind of delivery framework, you may engage with your stakeholders periodically to get some feedback from them, and then based on that feedback, you may then look to then make improvements. And in an agile framework, of course, we know we have things such as sprint demos and sprint reviews that are part of the ceremonies that we may do. And this is how we gain information and we learn from our experiences. So in terms of then how we traditionally learn, many of you may be familiar with this type of formal setup. When we were children or when we were younger, we often learned in a classroom such as this. So many of us may be more familiar with the more formal structured learning that oftentimes takes place from online and in-person classes from colleges and universities and educational institutions. But we also should recognize that there's also a lot of learning that can take place and learning through experiences in informal learning. So these are oftentimes unplanned and spontaneous activities where we can learn information. So these could take place in the form of experiments and discoveries. And there's also learning opportunities in non-formal learning environments. So these are intentional, but or they could be unintentional, but these are outside of our formal learning environments. So think about things like networking events where you meet somebody, you attain some new information or knowledge, and you've learned something. So the key thing to remember is that as part of building a learning experience and a learning culture, each of these different types of learning methods are all valid. No which one is better than another. It's all based on context. And all of these can contribute towards building that culture of a continuous learning and improvement culture. So again, as a leader, we really do need to question, why is this relevant to me and why is this important? So learning as an experience is very important because it aids in our professional development and our personal growth. It enhances our critical thinking and problem solving abilities and our abilities to be innovative and create innovations within our organizations. And it also enables individuals to acquire new skills and knowledge and stay relevant in a rapidly changing world. So for a second, I'd like you to pause and reflect and think about your own career path and your own career journey. At a certain point in your career, you may have felt that your current job, the job that you were in, the role that you were in, was no longer challenging or you no longer enjoyed it. Think about maybe some of the possible reasons why that was. And if one of them was that you felt that you weren't learning anything new, it could probably be because you weren't having some of these experiences that are being exposed to maybe some of the different types of learning activities that would then create that culture of continuous learning and improvement. This is very, very important as a leader. Of course, you want to make sure that your team is engaged. You want to make sure that the morale on your team is good. And you want to make sure that your team is constantly developing and learning new skills, new tools, using new tools and techniques that can not only drive the work that your team is doing, but also as your organization move it forward. So history has shown that businesses and organizations that do not keep, that are not forward looking and keeping on top of the trends are often the ones that fall behind. So this, as a leader, you should, be paying attention to and making sure that your team does have these opportunities to learn and that you are valuing learning as an experience and providing this to your team to help them develop professionally when possible. Okay, so now that we've taken a look and we kind of now understand and we have some of the foundational definitions and concepts of what continuous improvement and learning as an experience is, I now want to spend some time talking a little bit about this whole metaphor that we may traditionally view continuous improvement and learning under, and that is looking at it as a journey, or as you can see on the screen, the trip down the road with a set compass and a set direction, versus looking at it as a transformational experience. So today, I'd like to, as I mentioned in our introduction, I'd like to challenge you to change your perspective on this from a journey with a single destination and a fixed starting and end point to an experience. So from what we've discussed in learning, we already know that as adults, we don't learn in a pure linear fashion. And as such, we're not really sure why learning then is presented as a linear journey or a journey with a predefined destination and route. We know that a journey implies some kind of linear progression, but however, the experience and an experience, when we define it, can be characterized by our active participation, reflection, and enjoyment of the process itself. So one of the challenges and one of the issues of looking at continuous improvement and looking at continuous learning as a journey is, what if we happen to learn something or make a discovery and it's not on our predefined route? Then what do you do, or what happens? Is that necessarily a bad thing? If we're looking at a journey and we have a set itinerary or some set destinations, that could be a problem, where in reality, it should be viewed as part of an experience and not something that's necessarily a bad thing. So we don't want to limit ourselves. As humans, we have the capacity and we should be open to learning and be open to new experiences. So we don't want to limit ourselves at all. So I'd also like you to pause and for a moment and think about an experience you had, a memorable experience. So the example I have is, think about when you attended a concert of some type, some type of musical concert or some type of band or musician or performer that you really enjoy and you were really excited to go and see. So you may not have remembered the commute to the concert venue. You may not have remembered taking the subway or the drive there. But what most likely you do remember is the sounds of the music. You remember the atmosphere. You remember the people that you interacted with, the emotions that you felt. And from that, it was a memorable learning experience. So you may have learned that you don't really like that band or that genre of music, but you don't necessarily remember the process itself to get to the concert. You remember the experience itself and the takeaways from that experience. So likewise, when we use the journey as a metaphor, we can limit ourselves, and this can create some things that we probably don't want to have created within our teams or in our organizations. So viewing learning and continuous improvement as a journey, it can tend to create an artificial sense of pressure in that there is a specific endpoint in which people feel that they may need to meet. So as I mentioned, what happens if your journey is not as clear cut and is not as linear as what you had anticipated? What if your journey has some bends in the roads and you need to pause and take some detours? This may create some unnecessary stress and anxiety amongst your team mates that you don't want to have happen. It may lead to anxiety and self-judgment if that destination is not achieved. And as we think we can probably all agree, as leaders, we have a responsibility and should take seriously the well-being of our team. So we, of course, don't want to create an environment where people feel anxiety or they feel unnecessary stress. And we don't necessarily want to put the pressure on our team and also on ourselves as leaders as well. So as much as, it may be, and we traditionally think of learning as a journey, this metaphor, is fraught with some issues in itself, and that it can create an artificial sense of anxiety that we probably want to avoid for our team. Rather, we should maybe tend to look at learning and continuous improvement as the experience. So perceiving it as an experience allows us to embrace the unpredictability that we know occurs when we're learning something new, experience setbacks, and of course, enjoy learning for itself and enjoy just learning and not feeling that we have to meet some kind of predefined endpoint. So again, I'd like you to pause and reflect back on something that you either recently learned or learned in the past. So that could have been how to use a new technology, how to use a new tool. If you're trying to learn a new language in your free time, think about when you tried to learn a new word in that language. So you were probably not successful the first time you were trying to learn whatever it is, but at the end, you got your desired result. And when you reflect back, you can probably reflect back on the journey that on the experience itself that it took you to learn that, and you probably enjoyed the actual experience itself and not just the actual process that you took. So framing this in this way, as I mentioned, can help reduce anxiety, but it could also lead itself to the enjoyment of people learning just for the sake of learning something new, which as humans, as mentioned, we should be open to learning and experiencing new things. So there are some benefits to learning as an experience that we as leaders should be aware of. So I want to spend now a couple minutes talking about and going through what are some of the benefits of viewing learning as an experience. So foremost, as mentioned, as leaders, we want to make sure that our teams are actively engaged and people feel that they are part of the organization or they are part of achieving whatever, if it's an organization's goals, mission, and objectives, or a project team's goals, mission, or objectives. People also want to feel that they're in a position of driving their own personal growth. So viewing learning as an experience can also help motivate people. It can, allow people to be a little bit more curious and be open to new possibilities, but also create a sense of ownership over their own personal growth. Likewise, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, it also creates a joy of learning. So it brings joy and fulfillment to the learning itself. So when we think that, some of us may have some very negative experiences as our experiences of going to school and as students. And that's probably because at some point we felt that learning was a chore and it wasn't something that we actively enjoyed doing. We weren't learning something because we wanted to learn it or because it was enjoyable. We must have felt that, we might have felt that we had to learn this because we had to learn it. So shifting it to learning as an experience takes it away from being a little bit less of a checklist item that organizations have to go through with their employees and make sure their employees do, to focusing it on an experience that is enjoyable, and you're creating a group of lifelong learners who enjoy learning new things and developing their skills that will benefit the organization. And you're looking to build that culture of continuous improvement and learning. And likewise, one of the benefits is also creating the mindset shift. So you're viewing learning as an experience. This obviously encourages people to grow, and encourages people to be empowered, and it encourages people to become resilient, to overcome their obstacles, and to learn from their failures and from their mistakes, which is also key to creating that culture of improvement as well. So we talked a little bit about how to create the culture of continuous learning. I now want to shift over and let's spend some time talking about creating a culture of continuous learning and how we can do this as leaders. So as a leader, and as I mentioned earlier in today's session, I'd like you to assume that you are in whatever your actual official title is within your organization, that you have the ability and the power to influence others. So these 4 things that I'm recommending are things that anybody within an organization, regardless of your level of within the organization, can try and implement and have influence over. So how do you go about creating this culture within your organization? So there's a couple of things that I'd like you to actually consider, and that is providing leadership support, encouraging collaboration and communication, fostering a feedback loop, and then adopting what we call the fail fast mentality. So we'll spend a couple of minutes and we'll go through what each of these mean to help you create this culture within your organization. So foremost, providing leadership support. So creating a culture of continuous improvement and learning starts at the top with leadership support. It starts with leaders setting an example and modeling the behavior that they want to see within the organization. So this includes setting clear expectations and providing the necessary resources and training to foster a learning of culture. So even within your role, if you're not in a position where you can provide either the financial or the people or the physical resources, you are still in a position, many of us, to set by example the behavior that you would like to see others model within that in your organization. So leading by example and actively participating in improvement and learning initiatives is key and is something that all of us can do, even starting today. The second thing that leaders can do is encourage in collaboration and communication. So we know that collaboration and communication is vital to continuous improvement and learning. So communicating, providing venues for people to express diverse perspectives and different perspectives, sharing knowledge amongst teams and amongst peers and amongst different people within an organization to help people develop new skills and generate ideas will help you create this culture. So collaborative environments foster creative learning, problem skills, and a sense of ownership over the learning experience itself. Likewise, leaders can also work to provide feedback loops. So providing effective feedback, as we know, plays a critical role in continuous improvement and learning. It provides a mechanism for gathering insights, evaluating progress, and identifying gaps and areas that are in need of improvement. So regular improvement, and this could be both formal and informal feedback and improvement, both from leaders and peers, helps individuals and teams refine their approaches, address challenges, and sustain momentum. So there are a number of activities and tools that teams and organizations can use In a traditional waterfall, team, you may conduct activities such as a lessons learned activity, where you may look at a project at its completion and see what worked well, what didn't work so well, and then what were maybe some areas of improvement that could be taken into future either projects or processes within the organizations. On an agile team, feedback may be gathered more regularly in the form of actual formal retrospective ceremony. So during a retrospective ceremony, a team may also look to see what worked well, what didn't work well, and what are maybe some things that could be improved on immediately within the next iteration. And Nimble has a tool, Nimble Retro, and this is a great tool. I've been using it myself and trying it out, that can help leaders gather the feedback and can store information and help teams share and gather feedback on the areas that can be improved, but also to get a sense for the team, from the team, on what the progress is and how the team is feeling, which is also very important. And finally, one of the things that I would like to recommend that you maybe think about or try is adopting what we call the fail fast mentality. So experimentation is extremely important within the continuous improvement and learning culture. So it's important that people need to feel comfortable with being able to experiment and try new things without feeling that there will be repercussions if things do not work out or if things fail. So this may be leaders providing teams with an opportunity to do prototyping or to develop proof of concepts or trials, or doing some kind of small kind of maybe a feasibility study to see if something is feasible or possible. But it's the idea of trying something, seeing if it works or getting some feedback on it. And if it doesn't, then it's okay, but you take whatever the learnings are from that, and then you look to then improve in the future. And that's something that leaders and organizations can encourage. You can do on a large scale and a small scale, that will go a long way in creating a culture of continuous improvement. One of the resources that I'll leave you with, and we can also make available to you, is there is an article on the Nimble website with some additional recommendations on how you can look to create a culture of continuous improvement and learning. The article is called "Why is a Culture of Continuous Learning and Improvement Required in Project Management?" And we can, of course, make the link and share the link with everyone if you'd like to take a look at it and follow up with us after today's session. Okay, so I want to now shift and talk about promoting learning a little bit more as an experience, and some additional things that leaders can do to promote it as an experience, and spend some time in the next couple of minutes talking about potentially some obstacles and challenges that you may face if you're trying to build and create this culture of learning and improvement within your organization. So how can leaders promote learning as an experience? So oftentimes, as we mentioned, leaders are constrained by the resources. We often have timelines, we have demands for customers. So what are some tools that you could take as a leader and implement in your organization to help create this whole notion of learning as an experience, and to encourage and create that culture of learning within your organization? So a couple tools that I would like to recommend is this notion of just-in-time learning. So just-in-time learning, it emphasizes efficiency and relevance by delivering learning content in bite-sized modules that can be accessed on demand. So maybe instead of asking your team to take a full 12-week, 36-hour course, maybe there's specific topics that, based on the work that they are doing, you make that information available to them in a timely manner based on the tasks or activities that they're currently working on. Likewise, similar to just-in-time learning is the notion of micro-learning. So out there in the academic world, there are a lot of colleges and universities. You might be seeing, they're offering things like micro-credentials or micro-certificates. So this is basically taking a learning content and breaking it down into a little bit more smaller, digestible, and manageable chunks of information. So this also, learning things in smaller increments, has been proven that it may help people, in terms of the knowledge acquisition and retention. If you're learning things at a smaller and smaller kind of increments, rather than large, doing a full, course or whatnot, or looking at a large amount of information or data. And the last tool and technique that that organizations may want to try or consider when you're trying to build a culture of learning as an experience and promoting learning as an experience is gamification. So gamification applies game elements, so things such as competitions, challenges, rewards, and learning experiences to create a fun and engaging environment that motivates people to learn new content. So if any of you have school-age children, your children maybe their teachers may be using a tool called Kahoot. There's also lots of other tools that are available out there that may make learning a little bit more of an interactive game that could be done where people get points maybe for being able to demonstrate that they understand or that they know a concept or can do a technique or demonstrate a technique properly. So gamification, we all love playing games. Many of us play games in our free time with family and friends. So this takes that element into making learning a little bit more of an experience as opposed to just something that we passively are on a journey and we're just absorbing information. So as I mentioned, it's not always easy when you're trying to build this culture of continuous improvement and learning. So I'm going to spend now some time talking a little bit about some of the barriers and obstacles that you may face within your organization if you're trying to potentially roll out some of these tools and techniques that we've discussed and we've shared today. So it's not all sunshine and rainbows, unfortunately. Leaders may encounter some of the following. So the foremost one is resistance to change. So as humans, believe it or not, we really don't like change. A lot of us, sometimes depending on what it is, may just prefer to go to the status quo. So resistance to change is oftentimes a very common barrier to embracing learning and continuous improvement as experiences. So some individuals may prefer the status quo and they may resist new approaches or new technologies. However, overcoming this resistance to change requires effective change management strategies, clear communication, and creating a supportive environment for individuals to be able to adapt and grow. A second obstacle that leaders may face and you may face when trying to develop this culture is, of course, the fear of failure. So the fear of failure, it is very real. Many of us have had it at a certain point in our lives, whether it's personal or professional. So the fear of making mistakes, being judged, or facing negative consequences can discourage us from being, from wanting to explore and to experiment. However, leaders can build psychological safety nets. They can create a growth mindset and encourage a growth mindset, and they can reframe failure as an opportunity for learning to help individuals overcome this fear of failure. And what's very key here is really reinforcing the point that even though mistakes will happen and failures will happen, they are learning opportunities and there will not be any negative consequences for this, which oftentimes is one of the root causes behind the fear of failure. Likewise, lack of resources. Lack of resources can be a very big obstacle and a very big challenge that leaders may face. So as mentioned, we are all constrained by the resources that our organizations and our teams have. Organizations and leaders may have limited resources such as time, budget, or access to learning opportunities. And this can really impede the adoption of learning as an experience and trying to create that culture of continuous improvement. But for this, organizations can prioritize on their on what tools and techniques that they have available to make sure that the right resources are available in the right time. And oftentimes, some of these resources that may be needed to create the experience of learning and continuous improvement, oftentimes it may not cost a lot of money. They may actually be experiences that employees can do with very little to no budget. So now that we've identified some of the barriers and some of the obstacles, of course, I'm not just going to leave you like that. We're also going to spend some time talking about a little bit about what you can do to overcome these. So like the obstacle course that we see here on the screen, you too can climb the obstacle course and get over some of these barriers and deal with some of these challenges. So as I mentioned at the start of our session today, you as a leader and all of us have the ability and the power to overcome barriers and obstacles. So there's a couple things that collectively we can do together. So one of those things is that we can try and implement change management strategies. So this involves strategies that involve a clear communication, stakeholder engagement, training and support, and creating a culture that celebrates and rewards continuous learning. By addressing these concerns and fears with change, organizations can facilitate a smoother transition. Likewise, as I mentioned earlier, organizations can also help build and create psychological safety. So psychological safety is an environment where individuals feel safe to take risks, share ideas, and learn from failures without fear of negative consequences. This also includes fostering open communication and collaboration and a willingness to experiment. It creates a supportive culture that empowers individuals to embrace learning as an experience. And finally, organizations can also provide learning opportunities. And these are providing opportunities that are diverse and accessible learning opportunities, which we know is essential for overcoming these barriers and for providing learning as an experience. So offering ongoing training, it could be mentoring, both formal or informal, with people either inside or external to your organization, coaching programs, and creating a continuous learning environment that nurtures personal and professional growth. Okay, so there are a couple of key takeaways that, in summary, I'd like to kind of wrap up as we look to wrap up today's session that I want to leave you with as you go off and then on your experience of creating your cultures of continuous learning and improvement. So a couple of things I want to leave you with and a couple of things I'd like you to reflect and think about is that learning and continuous improvement should not be seen as a one-time journey. Rather, it should be viewed as an ongoing experience. So as we know, and as if we've seen, you're not necessarily traveling down a straight road. It's an experience where there may be curves on the road. You may need to take stops to refuel, and there may be obstacles and roadblocks on the way that you need to get around to get to where you want to be. So rather than viewing this as a journey with a predefined endpoint, route, and end destination, view it as an experience rather than a one-time journey, and view it as something that you will continue to be on rather than a trip you just take once and complete. By understanding the benefits of learning from experience and implementing strategies to promote continuous learning, organizations can create a culture of growth and improvement. So some of the key takeaways include embracing the mindset of continuous improvement, providing leadership support, fostering collaboration, and establishing a feedback loops to support continuous learning and growth. So likewise, I also want you to recognize that creating this culture of continuous learning and improvement also takes time and patience. So like the road itself, there will be bumps in the road, there will be curves, there may be things that will detour you, and that will take time and patience as well. So you need to be aware of that and to recognize that, and of course to plan for that as well as you embark on your experience. So in the end, the good news is that you will arrive at your destination. So your destination may not look like the bottom image here. It may not look like your traditional straight line. Your experience may look like this curvy line here. But what distinguishes both of these images is this: you notice at the end, they both arrive at the same destination. So instead of thinking of yourself as simply being a passenger, you have an opportunity now to be an active explorer and builder of a wonderful continuous learning and improvement culture and experience. So if we think back, if any of you are fans of the original 1960s Star Trek television show, what you may think about that show is that the show wasn't actually about the travel through space. So Captain Kirk and Captain, the rest of the crew of the Starship Enterprise, it wasn't actually about them, traveling through space on the spaceship. It was about navigating through that universe. And it was about meeting the new people on those planets and the experience itself. So as you embark on your experience to create your culture of continuous learning and improvement, I wish you nothing but the best of your success, hoping that you can take some of the tools and techniques I presented today to help guide you on your experience. So enjoy the experience and best of luck and wishes on your experience. So with that, I would like to wrap up for today. So I think we will pause there, and I think I'm on time. And I think we have time for some questions, which I wanted to leave time for some questions for today.
You're absolutely on time. Thanks for such a structured and nice, detailed session, actually, Christina. I think those in the audience who are either beginning or in the middle of challenges around their continuous learning journey would take away many valuable lessons from today's talk. So thank you very much for that. We have got a few audience questions, so let's start with those. So the first one is an interesting question, which is about a specific topic. The question is, would you say that learning the basics of Six Sigma would benefit the understanding of continuous improvement processes? And of course, continuous improvement comes from lean and agile bodies of knowledge. So I presume there is some overlap with what Six Sigma teaches.
Yeah, so definitely lean, Six Sigma, and any of these frameworks, there's other continuous improvement frameworks that are out there, would definitely help create that foundational knowledge of it. Different organizations and depending on what organizations use in terms of different frameworks for continuous improvements, will each have their own flavor of it. But having an understanding, so if Six Sigma, whoever the attendee is who asked this question, if Six Sigma is the framework for continuous improvement that your organization has chosen to implement, I would definitely recommend familiarizing yourself with it and with any other framework for continuous improvement that you are interested in. All of the frameworks that are out there, whether they're your traditional agile or lean, there's all aspects of these frameworks for continuous improvement and learning that could be taken and implemented in your respective organization, and that will hopefully help to build that culture and that environment that you're looking to create. So I would recommend, learn the basics of Six Sigma, learn the basics of any other continuous improvement framework that is out there, and take what you think is relevant and applicable for your particular environment or instance, and implement it along with, if you find some of the recommendations that I presented today also beneficial for your environment and for your team and organization as well.
Perfect. You covered several slides on this particular topic or related to this topic, but one of the challenges that most teams face is the resistance that leadership itself shows to investment in training and learning. So how do you convince? I mean, all too often you hear is from the leadership, you hear everything is going well for me. Why do I need to change? Why do I need to improve? And I know that you talked about it in several slides, including some of the objection handling, but specifically to leadership itself, if they themselves are not seeing the need for investment or not seeing the need for building that culture, are there things that you would provide as guidance to help have that dialogue with leadership?
Yeah, so oftentimes, and this, it's not systemic to waterfall organizations. Sometimes you also see this in agile and hybrid organizations as well, is sometimes, unfortunately, there is a disconnect between leadership. So especially if the organization is very hierarchical, and the actual teams that are doing the work. So one of the things that I would recommend a little bit more, and we talked about this when we're talking about creating that culture, and having tools like the feedback loops and communication engagement, is maybe a little bit more engagement and interaction with the teams that are actually doing the work, so that leaders can maybe experience some of the challenges and pain points themselves, and they can maybe see some of the blockers that's preventing teams from improving and from having and seeing areas that are in need of improvement or learnings. So one of the key things that I'm very much a fan of is inviting leaders, senior leaders, to things such as if there's demos, or if there's opportunities to display work, or if it's a stakeholder engagement, some type of stakeholder engagement forum, to actively participate in those sessions so they can get an understanding of what it is that is being worked on or presented. And then to have things like maybe, again, like skip level meetings with people on the team to get that feedback and to have maybe an informal feedback loop and to participate in maybe some of the feedback loop items, such as, retrospectives, or if there's lessons learned, so they can see firsthand and maybe they can share some of their perspectives themselves. These are all low cost activities that leaders can do. They do obviously might consume some of their time, but there's no financial dollar amount assigned to leaders participating in something like a retrospective or a demo or sitting in, a planning meeting with a team, that maybe then it will help them to understand and see for themselves what some of the challenges are and some of the gaps and what some of the barriers are for teams to, to either progress in their learning or that's stopping a team from improving.
Yeah, a lot of inputs there for getting leadership involved and to get them to really participate and understand their team's experiences in order for them to get involved. Great. One of the other things that again comes up often is, especially in these times when companies are laying off a lot of people, and there is talk about them hiring new people with new skills rather than training the existing people with the skills that they needed. What is the organizational what and where is the organizational charter in terms of the budgets for providing the learning and the training that employees need and teams need?
So that, of course, and it's interesting because budget questions are always, it's always based on the financial position of the business. As we know, businesses, the key objectives of a business is to generate income and profit and to be successful. So businesses do need to be mindful and being completely pragmatic and realistic here. Businesses do need to be mindful of how much money that they're spending. But I alluded to that there are learning opportunities and there are often tools out there that are low cost, or there might be $0 tools out there that businesses can use that can that employees can take advantage of, both existing employees and new employees coming into the organization, that may help to create the experience, the learning as an experience and the continuing learning culture that don't actually, will have any kind of impact on the bottom line and on the financial budget. So one of the key things that organizations can do internally that is a great learning, and when we talk about adult learning and learning from our experiences, is mentorship and coaching programs. Oftentimes, a lot of organizations, can look to set some of these programs up either with mentors that are internal to the organization. So having maybe senior leaders or people in different functional areas mentor people from other areas, or if there's community-wide mentoring programs that may be out there that maybe employees of businesses may be able to participate in that are of low cost. So this creates the whole learning as an experience, because you're learning from somebody else's experiences that are also might be completely valuable and realistic to you, that don't actually have a financial impact on the business. So my advice to businesses is, of course, you want to make sure that whatever it is that you do and you're looking to create this culture, that you're also mindful of what the financial position of the business is. But there are activities that you can do. There's lots of resources that are out there and available. In this day and age, the information age, it's almost like we're oftentimes overloaded with information. Like there's just so much out there, and so much of this could potentially be free or could be offered low cost to organizations, that really there is no excuse that businesses should have for not encouraging learning and continuous improvement for their organization, even if the financial considerations do need to be factored into.
Right. And I think in that context, the three, I guess you call them tactics or methods of learning, was the just-in-time learning, the micro-learning, and the gamification, which are all sort of tiny bits of, learnings available just when you need them, and therefore are of smaller size and therefore low cost. That is generally the assumption. I just wanted to mention that I think those three, given the current technology environment, are probably becoming far more prevalent. And in fact, I just wanted to also mention that in our Nimble tools, we provide several such what we call gamification, as well as just micro interactions opportunities that let team members learn from each other and to also encourage each other in many ways and so forth. So we are implementing some of those things that you just talked about. Wonderful. So I think that brings us to the bottom of the hour, or at least for some of the folks, not maybe for other folks who are on the half-hour clock. But anyway, thank you so much, Christina. I'm going to share my last slide just so that everyone has the contact information for Christina and for us. Do feel free to connect with Christina and for any follow-up questions or to any kind of engagement that you might want to have with her in order to help you with your continuous improvement efforts, and to learn more about our products and how we can help you in terms of not just continuous improvement but also for other overall collaboration and work management needs. Look at our website or connect with our sales team in order to learn more. Christina, thank you so much again for this presentation. I really enjoyed this. I've been really enjoying our interactions over the last several months, and I'm so glad that we are able to do this. And I look forward to many more such sessions over the coming months and years.
Yeah, you're welcome, and it was a joy to present today. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. For all the people in the audience, thank you so much for joining today. We look forward to having you in our next webinar. Till then, have a great rest of the day, and we'll see you soon. Thanks, Christina.